everyone. Today I'm interviewing someone very special. And so, Fig, if you'll go ahead and introduce yourself to everyone.
Yes, my name is Fionnghuala O'Reilly. I am a correspondent on CBS's Mission Unstoppable, and I'm a NASA Datanaut, and I am Miss Universe Ireland 2019.
We would like for you to share with us what you experienced on January the 6th.
So for those watching, January 6th, of course, that was the day that the DC riots and insurrection took place at the Capitol building. And like you mentioned, I do live in Washington, D.C., and I do live downtown. It was the morning that at the time it was a protest. And I was out that morning, and I was just out for a run, and I was chased down by a man who was screaming at me for wearing a mask.
My grandmother's 75 with diabetes and she beat COVID, but here you are running around with a mask on. I'm like 33. It's okay if she videotape me. I don't care. Hey, I'll give you that hit.
It was a really unfortunate event. I'm fine and I'm doing okay, and I managed to get away from the situation. I watched along with everybody else in the world as the events unfolded. And as the protest turned into a riot, turned into an insurrection, and ultimately, we're looking at domestic terrorism unfold in real time on television. Luckily, I was able to get it on camera. What you can't see in that video is actually how close I was to the police. There was a cop car in front of me and a cop car behind me. So I didn't I didn't think that anything would happen, but after the experience, I realized that there are police standing around me that did nothing. DC, we went under lockdown by 6 p.m. My mother and my youngest sister also lives in the city. My own mom had been out earlier that day for a doctor's appointment, and she got harassed on the streets. People were screaming at her. She's a black woman. She was wearing a mask, and luckily no one chased after her, and it didn't go any further than that. But one thing, it's important to point out that the people that stormed the Capitol, the large majority are not from Washington, D.C. They came from outside of the city. The city is anxious. I feel like people are stressed out, especially considering that, we don't know what the inauguration will be like come January 20th.
And I think it's so fortunate that you were able to record what happened, simply because I think it's something that people need to see is actually happening, and they need to see these events, because I feel like there are so many people who are in denial that these instances occur. How do you feel moving forward after that experience?
I think about how much gaslighting has taken place with people of color being able to share their experiences when it comes to racism and racial aggression. I protested in the streets of Dublin earlier this year for the Black Lives Matter protest, and I've seen the double standard now from BLM to what we saw here in Washington, D.C.
And so what is something that you would want the country to know, following that experience?
Words matter. I think that it's important to know that we all have a responsibility within ourselves to look at ourselves, how we view the events that have unfolded. I think it's important to call it what it is. It was domestic terrorism. It wasn't just a protest. It was extremely violent. We had congressmen, congresswomen that were hiding in shelter and in fear. It's important to call it what it is, and it's important to hold people accountable. There are people that, have to deal with the daily onslaught of being a person of color in this country. And I want to see more people listening and taking steps to further their understanding, and really just addressing that these are not things that are tolerable. It needs to end.
If you could say something to that man today, what would you want to say?
I don't know if there's anything that I could say that could explain to him how wrong it is what he did, and how serious it is, how it makes me feel. I've experienced racial aggression before, and I think many people of color, many Black people, understand that there are nuances from very passive things that people can say to very aggressive things that people can do that have affected them throughout their lives. And unfortunately, this isn't necessarily a singular event. The only time I've ever experienced racism
I understand where you're coming from, where, there's nothing you probably could say for him to really understand. And it's sad to think that people don't really listen to understand anymore. And that's one of the biggest issues that we face within this country.
I hope moving forward that there's more accountability, because, what I saw on the news was people got to walk out, they got to go home. And that is appalling to me, that we saw such a different story unfold in Washington, D.C., just a few months ago, when peaceful protesters for the Black Lives Matter movement were tear gassed and were shot with rubber bullets. And so I'm hoping that moving forward, there's a new plan, and that we see less bias, like accountability. That's what I'm looking forward to.
Absolutely. I hope that we can definitely move in that direction and hold people accountable in the future. And like you said, reduce the bias, because it's there. And I think that's where a lot of this anger fuels from. And we can't, like I said earlier, people don't listen to understand anymore. They're stuck in their ways, and that's going to get us nowhere. So I appreciate you. I thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. I think this was a very important topic that people need to hear and hopefully listen to understand what was said and the steps we need to take forward.
I appreciate being able to talk with you, Asia, about it. I'm glad that the Miss Universe organization and you as Miss USA, there's a platform to be able to discuss something like this, which, it's more serious, but it's definitely something I think that should be talked about.
I'm wishing you all the best.
Thank you so much. It was lovely to meet you, and good luck with your reign and competing at Miss Universe. I hope you're really excited about it, because it was a great experience for me.